All right, everyone, it's time for another round of rousing poll analysis among the Democratic Party. We do have a couple of new polls in there, so we've got a better look at basically what's happening in the field. None of it surprises me, and if you're paying attention to this channel, you knew that this was going to happen months ago. I'm just going to look over at it. Having two computers here is really a help when it comes to this sort of shit. For some reason, when I put RCP on the bigger computer, on the Alienware, every like 10 minutes or so, it'll blank itself out. I don't know what's wrong. I don't have any like weird extensions that should be doing it. So we're going to look at the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination polls. This is a link in the description. Now, by the time you see it, there could be a new poll on it for all I know, because RCP live updates throughout the day. We've got a couple of new polls, though. We've got Politico Morning Consult on the 4th. That was the end date. Quinnipiac on the 5th. They show basically the same thing. There's a little bit of an aberrance here with Warren. But with Biden, it shows stability. If you look at his long-term trend, what I said is that when he had fallen, or when he had risen up to, like, what was it, 42, that was months ago, those variations ultimately are meaningless. For the most part, people always look at these things, like they looked at Kamala Harris in the wake of her first debate performance, which was admittedly quite good. I said she was one of the main winners of the night. She skyrocketed. They always believe, well, it's a new paradigm. Now her new total is she's in third or fourth place forever. Like, she'll never lose that position. She's got this support. She'll stay there. That's usually not the case. I correctly predicted with Kamala Harris she would slide back down. It's like a Ben Carson thing. Gabbard, if she spikes, it'll be like a Fiorina thing. She has less staying power. Again, I say this with, well, I don't like Tulsi on guns and certain other things, but in a more general sense, she's semi-sane. Those of you, though, who like Tulsi Gabbard and call her mommy and stuff, I hate to break it to you, but she's incapable of breaking into the double digits. The race has gone on too long. She's been in the race for a long time. She's not a dark horse candidate who just joined. She's been in the race and never gained traction. Any upwards momentum that she ends up having, and the polls don't suggest she has any, in an electability election will dissipate quickly unless it's solidified. This was Harris's problem. With Biden, he's got about 30% of the field locked up, for the most part. He had a decent... The first debate performance he had wasn't that great, and he only lost a couple points of support off of his long-term average, which is somewhere in the mid to upper 20s. He's now gotten beyond that. He's at like 32. The last two polls, 33 and 32, respectively, from Politico and Quinnipiac. Second place now is Sanders. But if I look at the numbers here, if I remove the Harvard-Harris poll, which looked like an outlier anyway, it would be Elizabeth Warren supplanting Sanders by a small amount. Like, she would be a couple points ahead of where she is, I think, on here at that point. The Harvard-Harris poll estimated that Warren's support was at 8%. That screams outlier to me. I don't know exactly how they asked questions. It must be some second choice roundup bullshit that they did in their poll specifically, because it's not echoed in any of these others. The other lowest number Warren's at is that the Hill poll had her at 12. And that one appears not to be an outlier, but that was back on the 28th, so we need something a little bit more modern than that. By the way, in a moment I'll click over, and I haven't yet, see if there's any polling out of Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. Those matter, but there's been such sporadic polling that it's like, I don't know what's going on. We're flying blind when it comes to the first 4 states that vote. That is desperately needed. We need polling firms to go, especially into Iowa and New Hampshire, because like if Biden pulls off a win in Iowa, he gets a boost, the electability issue is decreased in terms of his age and stuff. He probably flies into New Hampshire, wins it, knocks Sanders out, and goes on for a clean sweep. If he loses in Iowa, there could be problems. If he manages, if in an electability election this fraught and this paranoid, you could say, among some leftists, if Sanders or Warren manages to nab Iowa, especially if Sanders grabs it, he probably grabs New Hampshire. That's his strongest starting state. If he manages to get the first 2, he could manage to keep Biden from getting South Carolina. That basically knocks Biden out. It doesn't necessarily mean Sanders wins, but it means Biden becomes far less electable. Biden relies upon managing to grab up Iowa, I think, in order to sweep everything, become the undisputed nominee at the end before Super Tuesday, arguably, and then everyone else would have problems. I'm going to click over here to these other states. I doubt that there's new polling. Nothing new from Iowa since the 18th. Keep this in mind. Go to New Hampshire. We've got something on the 4th from Boston Globe. Biden at 21, Warren at 14, Sanders at 17, and then everyone else sort of rounds it out and is basically pointless. In Nevada, we have nothing since the 21st. In South Carolina, nothing from since the 22nd. So this is what we have to deal with. We got one new poll in the last week. It looks like an outlier poll, and it's not even from a mainline network. Probably shouldn't even be aggregated. This is what I have to analyze through, everyone. This is really fun. God, you'd think that these groups would conduct a little bit more polling, at least in a couple of the beginning states. Like, it's not like they don't have the money to perform the polling. Like, economists can easily say, okay, we're going to do a one-off for Iowa, and so that people can get a little bit of a reading. So you might as well do your own internal polls. Maybe I should figure out how to do some internal polling myself. I'll just do my own polling of people in these states. Set something up so only people in Iowa can connect to a certain website and say who they want to vote for. It wouldn't exactly be scientific, but you get a large enough sample size, trust me, it wouldn't matter so much. As of right now, though, here's my analysis, and it's been basically this way for months. Biden will be nominated by the Democratic Party unless something significant changes. A dark horse candidate gets in, someone who's not already in the field, because anyone who's in the field and not in the top 4 or 5, they're not viable anymore, really. I hate to tell all of you fans of Gabbard and Klobuchar and Castro and Gillibrand and all these others, the 10 of you that support these people, they're not going to be nominated. It's not going to happen. You need a dark horse, or Biden has a significant health issue, or you have a real soaring like a JFK or a Reagan Mondale moment or something with one of the other candidates, like a Reagan v. Mondale second debate moment. You'd have to have something like that at the third round of debates, or a dark horse, or a health problem, or something like that, in order to prevent Biden, I think, from becoming nominee. This means Trump 2020. It means he's probably going to be reelected. Biden does not have, I think, the charisma or the stamina to campaign against Donald Trump. Keeping in mind, of the Democratic field, Biden is one of the more palatable. He's not a threat to the United States. Look, he's been in the White House before. He was VP. The Obama era, while not great in some ways, did have a few advantages, and it didn't collapse the country. Whereas I think that if a Warren got in, or a Sanders, or certainly a Kamala Harris, I think it would be terrible for this country. Biden, acceptable, tolerable in many ways. And he's a neoliberal. Like the idea that, well, I'm going to take everyone's guns and double the tax rate for these evil corporate... Nah, that's bullshit to get elected. It's just like Obama. He promised a lot of shit to the far left to get him to vote for him. Did he do any of it? Did he close Gitmo? Did he stop droning people? No. Did he destroy the corporations so that everyone had to join a hippie collective like the left wanted? No, it's not going to happen. Biden's a corporate liberal. Buttigieg, arguably, even though he's strategically minded, Buttigieg's smart. This is what I'll tell you. This is why I think Buttigieg, of the top 5 candidates, if the Dems were smart, they would nominate Pete Buttigieg. He's fucking intelligent. He knows not to make the fact, hey, he knows not to come out on a rainbow-colored stage and say, hey, I'm gay, vote for me. He's not making, the one thing that gives him a little bit of a boost within the Dem Party, he's not making a platform. He's playing it safe. He knows if he becomes the nominee and he's done that, he can't get elected, because it'll come off as preachy. The fact that he's gay is already a selling point. He doesn't need to talk about it. Everyone knows he's fucking gay. Nobody gives a shit. Also, he understands the difference between strategy and pragmatism. Strategy-wise, he said, look, the party needs to go to the left in order to, sort of make a splash, generate the energy, get elected. But you can tell he's not actually that far left. He's a corporate liberal who's doing an Obama-style job of rebranding himself to get nominated. I don't think it'll happen, but I think he would be the best nominee from a strategic standpoint. I think that of the viable people in the Democratic Party, in the Democratic field, Buttigieg is the only one that could provide a legitimate challenge to Trump. Close second would be Biden, which is not saying much for the field. And some people, when I say this, they're like, well, sticks the Republicans, sticks the conservatives, sticks the MAGA hat wearer. No, I'm not saying this. I'm saying from a political standpoint, if I take my liberty-loving hat off, if I take my political hat off and say I don't have any political opinions, I'm totally apolitical at the moment and I'm analyzing this race, do I see anybody in the Dem field who is likely to beat Trump? No. Not of the viable candidates. I see one that would provide kind of a legitimate challenge, that's Buttigieg. Another person who I think would lose but not disgracefully, which is Biden. And then I see a bunch of fucking losers who would get curb stomped by him. I think the Democratic lay people have deluded themselves into thinking that centrist and swing voters will go for an Elizabeth Warren, a Bernie Sanders, or a Kamala Harris leftist. instead of getting totally turned off to those messages, not allowing, in the internet era, not allowing them to move back to the center if they get nominated, which is an important step for a candidate. It's something Trump bucked that trend. Trump has become, in some ways, more palatable politically to people. Socialism has not. If anything, it's losing support among most segments of society. You've got to understand that most people in the country have pretty much decided which side they're going to vote for if they're voting for anyone. It's that 10 to 20% of the electorate that forms soft support or is totally independent or kind of apolitical. Those are the people you need to target. If you think you can target them, if somebody's on the fence, offering them more leftism is not going to convince them to join your cause. But that's what the Democrats are doing. They've gone into a purity spiral, and that's very dangerous for them to do. Biden and Buttigieg have not taken the bait. Buttigieg, I think his operative strategy is to let Biden implode and hope that people's flock to him. I don't know if it'll work. If he becomes the nominee, we might not see a Trump re-election. Trump may be a one-termer if Buttigieg becomes the nominee. The thing is that largely it's not written in his stars to become the nominee. It's unlikely. It's possible, it's just not likely. That's about all. Peace out.